without further ado, I am so excited to introduce our head of school, Mr. Bill McGee, and he is going to get us started with today's program.
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome everyone. I understand we have close to 400 participants on this call, which is by far the largest group who has tuned in. And so we're so thankful that you've taken time, taken your lunch hour or taken a break during the day to join us on this call. Before I pray, I thought I would share a few comments about what we've been up to since we have last met online. You know, when the school year ended, it did not end for the teachers or leadership team. We still had work to do in preparation, not only just finishing the school year with some routine administrative tasks, but also making our plans for next year. And you got a copy of that. It was a publication sent to you in early June called the New Heights Educational Plan. Now that plan was not a detailed plan with every answer to every question that you had, but it was an overview of how we intend to move forward next year given the possible scenarios. But we had to put that together in short order. And so my leadership team worked very hard for really about a week and a half as we planned for next year to be successful. So then if you didn't hear from us for a couple of weeks, it was because these worthy servants were also weary servants. We had worked very hard over the last quarter of the school year, and we needed some time off. So if your emails to us were unanswered for a while, or you got the out of office message, please understand we needed a break because we knew that once we returned, we'd be hitting the ground running. And based on this session today, you'll see the work that we're doing and continue to do in preparation for next school year. So with that, I want to just ask God's blessing on our time together. So if you'd bow with me, please. Oh, Father, we bow this afternoon in humble submission to your greatness, your sovereignty, your providence, your loving kindness to us, your children. Father, we're thankful for safety, for health. We're thankful that you have watched over our community these past few weeks, that you brought us through a very difficult time during the last quarter of our school year. And we're thankful that our community has been minimally impacted by this virus, and that those who have been impacted have been brought back to health or have realized a very short-term impact. And so for that, we're thankful, Father. We're thankful that you have given us direction as to how we should continue the education of our students. We have prayed for your guidance and wisdom, your discernment, and we are putting our plans together, and we trust that they are your plans, Father, and that if we are not going in the right direction, that you would redirect our paths. Father, I just thank you for the families who make up a part of our community, for these students that we serve. I thank you for the sacrifices they're making and for just their confidence in us as a school to serve their children's needs. And I just ask that you will bless them. You will provide them encouragement and rest and the resources they need to continue their child's education. Father, I ask your blessing upon our speakers today. May their words be encouraging, informative, and full of wisdom. And I just dedicate this time to you. It's in your Son's most precious name I pray. Amen. All right, just a reminder of the different resources we have available. If you have questions regarding technology, RenWeb, contact information, tuition assistance. If you need to contact our nurse, those are all the email addresses you can direct your questions towards. I do want to make a comment on tuition assistance. We are continuing to offer tuition assistance. In fact, the committee met just earlier this week, and I thought I'd bring you up to date on some figures. To date, we have awarded $835,000 in tuition assistance to 107 students, which represents about 12% of our student body. That compares to historically anywhere from 6 to 8%. So we have seen obviously a need to provide financial help to our families so that they can keep their children enrolled in our school. The average award for those 107 students is just over $7,800. So as you can see, there's been significant resources dedicated to tuition assistance, and I'm so thankful for our parents' response to our Stronger Together Fund, which makes it possible for us to continue to serve our families. I do want to make an important announcement. The leadership team, with the blessing of our Board of Trustees, has determined that because we're not sure exactly the large groups meetings that we'll be able to have and whether or not we'll be able to gather together for chapel, we are going to suspend the dress uniform requirement for next school year. Now, the key there is we're suspending it. We're not doing away with it. So we certainly will reinstitute the dress uniform requirements in the following year. But because of the uncertainty of chapel services that are in groups, now I want to make it clear, we will still have chapel, but we may not be able to congregate in an auditorium in a large group. So we just felt like it would be less of a burden on our families if we did not require your children or you to purchase the dress uniform next year. So please take note of that. We will certainly describe that in our student parent handbook. And you know, there still will, the other requirements for uniform requirements will still be in place, and there'll be more information about how you might purchase uniforms for next year on the daily wear uniforms next year. That information is forthcoming. All right, next slide, please. I mentioned the Stronger Together Fund. Currently, we have raised over $112,000 in addition to, or since we transitioned to the Stronger Together Fund. We transitioned our annual fund from the typical annual fund to the Stronger Together Fund, which is dedicated solely to tuition assistance. And your generosity has raised over $112,000. So parents, thank you for those of you who contributed to that fund. Your generosity is making it possible for literally dozens of students to remain enrolled at Legacy Christian Academy. And so I can't thank you enough for your generosity. At this time, I want to turn it over to our board chairman, Mr. Brad Brenneman, who has a special introduction to make. So Brad?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill, and everyone on the call today. Just first, I want to reaffirm Mr. McGee and the entire leadership team, both on this call as well as not on this call, our faculty and staff, for just tireless investment and very wise decision-making, often having to make decisions on the fly because of all the uncertainty. And we as trustees are very, very grateful for your continued wisdom and service. I am honored today to introduce a new trustee, a new member of our Board of Trustees, Mr. Nick Johnson. And it is a distinct honor and joy for me to introduce Nick. Nick and his wife, Selena, and their three kids, Blake, Callie, and Addie, have been a part of the Legacy family for a long time. In fact, all of the kids really since pre-K. Nick and Selena, some of you may or may not know, own the Lakes Tennis Academy here in Frisco. They have very deep ties within the community, have been very, very active servants at Preston Trail Community Church and throughout the Legacy community. What I love so much about Nick is just his deep faith, his passion for LCA's mission, his creative and thoughtful mind about thinking about opportunities for the future, and just maybe most importantly, his high energy, joy of life. And there is maybe no one I enjoy being around more than Nick Johnson. I'm very, very pleased to introduce Nick, and Nick's going to offer a few words. And Nick, if you don't mind, in addition to sharing your LCA story, maybe just any initial observations from your first couple of meetings that you've been a part of would be great.
You bet. Thanks for that, Brad. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, so Selena and I were both not private school kids. I went to Lindale High School, the hometown of Miranda Lambert, claim to fame there. And, you know, kind of the LCA started story for us, I think it's 2007. Jay Allison, who helped start the school, showed up at the tennis academy one day and asked if he could buy a net for his house. And I said, yeah, you can buy a net. In fact, I've got a guy, we'll come over, we'll put it in at your house. And so we go over to Jay's beautiful giant house, and Jay and I are talking the whole time. All he can talk about is Legacy Christian. He didn't want to talk about his card collection or anything else, but the school he's so excited to be a part of and how it's impacting the next generation. Oh, that's cool. About 2 weeks later, I got to the mail and I get a book from Jay, the Bema. I knew there was one judgment, you know, the white throne judgment after you die, sheep and the goats. I didn't realize there was another judgment, which the Bema, which is where the Lord says, what did you do with what you were given? Your money, your tennis came, all that stuff. And so as Selena and I started talking, I thought, you know, Blake's 4, 3, whatever it was. I think we have enough money to send him to pre-K 4. Let's try out. And so we did that and loved it. Walked in, teachers praying over Blake as we start our conferences. All the families we met were amazing. And I told Selena, I'm like, I think this teacher even like prays for Blake on her time off. Like she seems like she really knows and cares about him. And so I thought maybe we got lucky. So let's go kindergarten. We got enough money. I think we can do kindergarten too. And 13 years later, 3 kids later, kind of the same process year after year of not perfect, but teachers that have cared, really families that we get to be a part of through our classes and through sports and activities and all that. It's been why we love Legacy. And yeah, it's been amazing getting more educated on how important the education aspect is, because ours has been so relational. That's what attracted us to the school. And as our kids are getting older and seeing all the great schools that the graduates are going to, that's becoming more and more known to us. As far as the board stuff, you know, I guess I've been a 2-hour virtual meeting and then a 4 or 5 hour, end of year summary. I'll tell you 3 things I've noticed. One is I'm glad that Legacy doesn't rank board members' education, because I'd be bringing up the caboose in that category. That's my first observation of the board members. Second, I feel like I heard really good, healthy debate where board members could push back respectfully in the best interest of the school and the kids. And I'm obviously, Brad and Bill's leadership creates that comfortableness. And the last is you couldn't pay me enough money to take Bill McGee's job. The number of hats that he wears and the expectation, I had no idea until I got behind the scenes to realize the stresses and all the things we expect him to be excellent at. I think my job's tough, owning a tennis academy and the expectations on me. You couldn't pay me enough money to do his job. That's another one. So that's what I got. Anything else?
Thank you, Nick. That's been fantastic. And again, really grateful you are serving among the trustees now. I know I share that on behalf of all of the trustees. And
Go ahead and toss things back to Mr. McGee, who is going to introduce Ken Williams.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you Mr. Ken Williams, who is our Director of Diversity. Now, Ken is not new to our school, so Ken was hired 2 years ago to as our first diversity coordinator, but also as a 7th grade Bible teacher. So Ken's been in our community teaching and helping us jumpstart our Kingdom Diversity Initiative for a couple of years. We had made the decision back in January that this would be the year in which Ken assumed full-time responsibilities as our Director of Diversity. And there's a lot to that position, and I won't go into a great detail this afternoon, but I wanted Ken to just say a few words to you and also give you a preview of a very important event coming up on July the 11th. We have put together a Kingdom Diversity Task Force, and they are convening the morning of July the 11th. And I'll let Ken talk a little bit about what we hope to accomplish during that planning session. So without further ado, Mr. Williams, would you take over?
Yes, thank you, Bill, for that introduction. And I look forward to serving the families of the LCA community. And I look forward to being a major resource here throughout the years to come. So I thank God for this position. It is one that is much needed, and it is one that can be very impactful on the future of Legacy Christian Academy. As we move forward, based off of our first meeting with our families of color back in February, and as a follow-up to many of their questions and as a follow-up to many of their concerns, a diversity task force has been put together. Now, we also have a diversity committee. So the task force doesn't take the place of the committee. It only provides another layer to getting other people involved in the mission of Kingdom Diversity. But the Diversity Task Force will get together July 11th to strategically put together a plan for this upcoming year. We would like to have a mission statement in place. We would like to have a vision statement in place. We would also like to have an information link or a resource link in place connected to our website for our parents who may have questions about our Kingdom Diversity Initiative. But we also want to be able to close those gaps. So what you see on paper, we also want to be able to make sure that you're able to see those same things here on campus when you come to Legacy Christian Academy. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working with those who will be a part of the Diversity Task Force. Look forward to working with those that are part of the Diversity Committee. So again, if you have any questions for me, I will be at the upper school campus, and I am here to serve in any capacity that I can. Bill?
Great. Thank you, Ken. That was a great explanation. I also would add that, our Kingdom initiative, Kingdom Diversity Initiative, is a result of the very first initiative in our strategic plan, which calls for Legacy to become a community that welcomes Christian families from all backgrounds. Okay, by that we mean all races, all nationalities, all ethnicities, different denominations. We want to reflect God's kingdom and his diverse kingdom. And we want to make sure that we are serving those families who are not in the majority, and that who might feel a little intimidated, or may perhaps might need some support as they come into our community. And so Ken plays a very vital role in that. And it's all part of our long-range strategic plan to make LCA a welcoming community that honors Kingdom diversity. So I'm really excited about what our upcoming meeting and what will emerge from that. So now I want to get into the details, and I know this is the main reason we have so many on the call today, is you're looking for details about what the school year is going to look like next year, and we're prepared to provide those details. So my senior leadership team will be answering questions that we anticipate that you have about our morning routines, what the day will look like. We're going to answer questions about our new online academy. So whereas we may not be able to answer every single question you have, obviously, because some questions are not able to be answered at this time, you should get a lot out of this session. So without further ado, I'm going to let Adam serve as the moderator, and members of my senior leadership team will be, and the crisis management team will be answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. McGee, and thank you to everyone for joining us today on a Friday afternoon. I was just looking at, we've got about 330 people actively on the call. That's exciting. I know everyone's eager to share this information with you. And just to give you a little bit of an outline, we're going to start off by talking with Nurse Detloff and addressing some of the health questions, health and safety questions, and then we'll transition into the operations portion about how we're going to implement some of the health and safety standards, and then we will spend a good chunk of time talking about the academics and the different and various educational models that are available for next year. So with that, we're going to jump in with Nurse Angie, and I'm just going to ask a broad question. Can you describe the preventative protocols that your team has been working on for next year?
Yes. At this point, there are several preventative measures that will be in place. We plan to do temperature checks prior to anyone entering the building. High-touch surfaces in the classroom will be disinfected at least twice a day. Hand sanitizer will be provided to use in each classroom, and additional wall-mounted dispensers will be available in the hallways. And we will be encouraging everyone to bring a water bottle from home to avoid anyone drinking directly from the drinking fountains.
All right, thank you. Let's talk about masks for just a minute. Are there any requirements next year for staff and or students? And if so, can you explain what those are?
Sure. As we look ahead to the upcoming school year, we realize that guidelines may continue to change. But for now, we plan to take the approach of when we are able to maintain a physical distance of 6 feet apart, face coverings will not be worn. And when we're unable to maintain this physical distance, then face coverings will be worn. So during a routine school day, the classroom setting will allow for physical distancing, and face coverings will not be worn. They will only be worn when physical distancing is not possible. So a few examples of this would be while students are in the hallway walking to the library or specials classes, and during passing periods, or in the classroom during small group projects. Face coverings and gloves will also be worn during engineering classes and science labs. So in order to follow this approach, we will be asking parents to send a face covering with each of their students to wear if and when the activities just mentioned occur during the school day. Faculty and staff will be asked to do the same. We will have a supply of masks available in each of the classrooms if a student does forget or needs to replace their face covering during the school day.
All right. With that question, I want to give principals an opportunity, or Daniel, in case you have additional information that you can share regarding physical distance measures and how they might be implemented at your specific areas or divisions.
Regarding some potential small group opportunities, instructional times in the classroom that are very important, but not, or very short term. You know, you get together to work on a science lab, or you get together to work and discuss a problem together, or small discussion groups. So it's important for them to have these masks on them. Just think of it just like having a pencil. It's part of the day. Keep it in your backpack, have it ready. You know, I think it's also good if someone potentially may have, you know, maybe they have hay fever and they just naturally cough quite a bit, and they can put one on temporarily until that may pass. So I think there's a lot of positives in Angie's committee and what they've done to recommend this, and we see it being very manageable in the learning environment.
Okay. And Nurse Detloff, can you, just a clarifying statement. So there are going to be instances where we are requiring masks during various points in the school day.
Yes, if we're going to follow the current recommendations in regarding that physical distancing. So in those situations where the being 6 feet apart is just not possible, we want to protect everyone involved, and we will go ahead with the face coverings.
Okay, thank you. Final question for you. What is the protocol if and when we have a confirmed COVID positive case on campus?
Well, communication will be of the utmost importance due to the urgency in reporting the COVID-19 illnesses. The process of communicating this information will be done in cooperation with our local health departments. Currently, our plan includes a specific line of notification that I will be responsible to initiate, and those notifications will be determined by contact tracing. This summer, we did have a situation in which we had to implement our COVID-19 protocol. Denton County Public Health and the individuals involved were notified, and then they were able to follow the recommendations to either self-quarantine or undergo testing. I'm very thankful for all the resources we had available and how this allowed us to carry out our protocol.
Very good. Thank you. We've had a couple questions about whether kids could wear face shields instead of an actual mask. I don't know if you're able to address that now or if those are details that will be determined in the coming weeks and days.
Sure. I think with by using face coverings, that may include a face mask that goes around the ears or is tied, or face covering may be ones that are worn around the neck and are just pulled up to cover the nose and mouth when needed. And face shields would be another option, whatever the student or staff member or person would be most comfortable with.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Mr. Dyer, we're going to jump over to you. Everybody's favorite subject in school, or at least my favorite subject in school, was lunch. What can you tell us about lunch?
Yeah, so thank you, Adam. Obviously, lunch is an important part of the day, and there's a lot of questions relating to that. So let me start with upper school. So for lunch at the upper school students will still come down to the lunch commons to purchase their lunch. Mr. Mosley and his team are working on some plans that will allow some of the students to utilize the dining areas while others will go up and eat in their classrooms, and some type of rotation where, you know, everybody gets a turn down in the commons area. More details will come as they finalize that. To speed things up, we're taking our serving area and dividing it into two sections with identical food options on each side, and that allows us to process the kids more quickly. We are going to require the students to sanitize their hands before they enter the serving area, and of course we'll limit the number of students in that area at any given time, and we'll be enforcing that distancing while they're in line using, you know, signs, floor stickers, and also adult supervision on hand. When they're in the dining area and using that, those that can, we'll limit the number of students per table, and we'll spread them out so that we can continue to support the distancing needs. We are moving forward with the touchless transactions, where we'll use barcodes that we'll have on ID cards that we'll issue to the students. And we'll continue down that path and have that available for the families at that point. And with respect to the food, obviously, we're going to need to simplify the menu, since we need to either prepackage the hot meals and create grab and go type cold items on the sandwiches and the wraps and salads. They won't be able to serve themselves with tongs and the various options. So it'll be a simplified menu and something that can be taken quickly and taken with them. So that's the upper school. Lunch at the South Campus is different. So at this time, we don't have any plans to utilize the cafetorium for food service and dining. All the lunches at the lower and middle school class will be delivered to the classrooms each day. Similar to the upper school, that's going to require us to have a simplified menu for these younger students. Another change, though, is that parents for the South Campus, lower and middle school students, will need to pre-order their meals for those students ahead of time using a link on a website that we're preparing for this purpose. Details of that will be shared once we have this procedure finished and documented and tested and make sure everything's working right. We still feel very comfortable. We're going to be able to accommodate all the specific food needs related to this, such as food allergies and other things related to that. So that is what we can share at this point related to lunch. It is in some cases radically different, in a couple of cases just a little different, but definitely within protocols for us.
All right, next question. What additional cleaning and safety measures are in place?
So we've touched on this in previous town halls, and we'll, for those that didn't attend, others will remind, and Angie's actually touched on a couple already. We have acquired MERV 16 level filtration for our AC units. So basically, those of you that have a furnace at home and you have to put that little filter in, we've acquired MERV 16 level filters, which is the AC systems unit equivalent of having an N95 mask on. So we will have much better filtration of anything that's out in the air as it passes through our AC system. We have purchased plexiglass shields for use at the reception areas, just to help protect both sides. We did a little bit of construction this summer to expand the usable, pardon me, the usable visitor space down at the south reception to allow our visitors and guests to spread out a little more easily while they're waiting. As Angie touched on, temperature screening of all visitors as well as students. Anybody entering our building for the first time that day is going to need to be screened. As Angie touched on again, regular cleaning of any common touch surfaces such as doorknobs, countertops in the reception area, shared spaces, that type of thing. Our porter staff will be cycling through the buildings on a regular basis, continually trying to clean those areas. We will, of course, do sanitization each night during our cleaning process of the rooms. We will be placing signs and stickers throughout the campus to remind us of the distancing needs and other needs and to reinforce those. We are putting touchless towel dispensers in every bathroom on campus. And as Angie also said, hand sanitizer dispensers in all the classroom hallways and the common areas, and sanitizer in the classroom as well. And we're also providing surface sanitizing solution in spray bottles for each classroom.
All right, thank you. That was a lot of information. I want to jump back real quick to lunch. Can you talk about microwaves? Will microwaves be available?
That actually came up in a impromptu discussion as we were continuing to work through our lunch needs. We don't have a determination on that quite yet. So that's a discussion that'll still need to be had with the principals now that we're back on campus after our little break. So we know we need to have a protocol prepared for that. We just don't have that written quite yet.
Okay. And kids will still be able to bring their own lunches, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Good. Thank you. So next question to the principals, kind of in the realm of, as we talk about physical spaces and physical distancing, can you talk about what the actual classrooms will look like in terms of configuration? Go ahead, Tiffany. We'll start at the bottom and work up.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So in lower school, we have certainly been blessed by our board for the opportunity to have smaller class sizes next year. So I have to tell you, my teachers, this is one excited group of teachers that I have this summer in preparation for next year. And so with these smaller class sizes, this is going to allow us to spread our student desks across the classroom. But one thing that parents, I want you to know, I know that we're hearing about, sanitizing and masks, and, I'm sure in your minds, in a parent's mind and heart, you're picturing a sterile environment for your child, which, their health and safety is first and foremost, obviously. But one thing that's not going to be taken away out of our classrooms are the love and the relationships that we have with your children. And so please know that we're still here to love on them. We're still here to, have those relationships, to build them up and guide them throughout the year. And so please know that we're still the same people who loved on them last year, and we'll be the same people this year. So anyway, just wanted to kind of share that's been on my heart lately, as you're hearing about all of these things that are put into place. And obviously we do need to follow guidelines and things that are handed down by Governor Abbott and the CDC and TEA and all these, government agencies. But, at the end of the day, we're still the same legacy community and family.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Before we go to Glenn to talk about middle school, we had a question about how the classroom spacing will affect Spanish immersion classes. I want to give you a chance to speak to that before we move on.
So the Spanish immersion classes are going to look exactly like the English classes. So for example, in first grade, rather than having, our normal class of, 20, 22 students with a lead teacher and an aide, all of our immersion classes will be split into two. So there will be a class of 12 students with a lead teacher and another class of 12 students with the lead teacher. So within those classrooms, we'll still be able to, spread the desks apart and look just like the other classrooms in our school.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Mr. Dibley.
Similarly, we've taken out like any personal belongings of the teachers, any additional furniture that it doesn't need to be there, so that the room will essentially be just the desks and the students and the teacher and their small desk, just so we can maximize the number of students in the room, or at least get the ratio at the right level. And then we'll be using the stage in the auditorium, in the cafeteria for band and some other spaces like that, so to keep up with the physical distancing. But essentially, the rooms will be just desks and students, just so that the ratios are correct. If that makes sense.
Very good, thank you. And and we had a question about how students will be changing classrooms. I don't know if you're prepared to speak to that yet, or if you're still finalizing those details.
So it's going to be impossible to keep the students in one classroom all day. Just the number of combinations of types of classes that students have to be in each day. So as was mentioned, the students will be physically distanced in the classroom, but where that's not possible, students will be required to wear masks in the hallways. So during passing periods, everybody will have masks on as they make their way to the next class.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Mosley, you want to talk about the physical configuration in the upper school?
Sure, thank you. Very similar to the other divisions in that when we have rooms, keeping those classes a little bit lower in the amount that we have, we're looking at 12 for the basic rooms that we have. Of course, we have some larger rooms up here in the upper school, a little different than in the lower school campus. We have rooms like choir room, which is going to be converted, that you may have more than 12 and be able to accommodate that. Not a lot more, but a few more may have a class of 15, 16 or something like that in those areas. So it will be that there's quite a bit of different and moving depending on how the schedule works out and how we're able to accommodate all these additional sections that we're creating. So we'll be creatively using some spaces like the Learning Commons, the band room, the choir room, the digital lab. Those are some of our larger rooms that may help accommodate some of the scheduling needs that we have. But other than that, we're still maintaining, that 6 foot distance and not getting beyond that standard, but potentially using some of the bigger rooms for a little bit higher normals than all the other rooms.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Mr. Dyer, we're going to jump back over to you. And can you talk about the car line morning routine, how car lines are going to look?
Very good. All right, so at this time, we don't anticipate that the car line routes will be any different than last year. But as Nurse Angie alluded to, what will change is the need to screen for an elevated temperature before your student can join our on-campus community for the day. So for those students who drive themselves to school, there will be either temperature kiosks or staff members at the entry points with handheld thermometers checking students before they can enter. Students at both campuses who are driven to school and dropped off their car lines, we will need to check their temperature prior to them exiting the car. So this is going to involve either in through the window or open the door, but we will want the student to stay in the car until their temperature is confirmed and it's determined whether or not they can step out and join or not. Students with an elevated temperature beyond that allowable threshold that's set by Nurse Angie according to our guidelines, they'll need to return home until the reason for the fever can be determined. And then the ongoing education of those students during that waiting time can be coordinated through the school division administrators. So we certainly don't want an interruption in their education. And we recognize that we would need to shift quickly to ensure they can continue from home. Students that are being brought to school early for athletics or band practice, they will also need to be checked by a staff member or a coach before they can join their classmates for those activities. So we do recognize that these extra steps each morning are going to add a certain amount of time to the car line process. It's just a given. So right now the principals and the administrators are working through their school schedule calculations and adding in anticipated start times for car lines, and that'll be shared once they've completed this planning and we have a better idea of how much extra time we think might be needed for car lines in this situation.
Okay. And taking off your facilities hat and putting on your IT hat for a little bit, talk about some of the new technology that's been acquired in preparation for the new school year and maybe a little bit about why.
Sure. So we made it our goal this summer to increase the number of technology devices in the lower and middle school classrooms to ensure that if we needed to go back into a distance learning scenario again, that we would be in a position to allow devices to go home with the students. I know some, excuse me, I know some families struggled, especially if they had more than one student or had to share with a parent. And we recognize that. And so we've worked to try to make it where we can assist those families with a device as needed. So with that in mind, we purchased an additional 120 iPads, and that has allowed us to get to where every classroom, we can have a dedicated mobile device per student in each classroom. So that has a couple benefits. One is that while they're at school, if and when they're using their devices, there's no need to share. So they will have one that's assigned to them, it's theirs. We're not handing technology devices back and forth between the students or having to bring them together to do that. So we also believe this will enhance their familiarity with the apps and the programs because there'll be a better ability to use it in the classroom. So that way also, if they have to transition to home use, they're already more comfortable with those programs and how to access and use them on those devices. It becomes more seamless. So that is the mobile device classroom change we've done. To accommodate the smaller class sizes, of course, we've had to create some classroom spaces that are not normally classrooms. And so in those instances, rather than equip those with projector systems, we decided instead to purchase interactive whiteboards, which allows us flexibility of that space usage both now and in the future for being able to transition quickly for whatever need is needed on the spaces on campus. Excuse me, with the additional devices on campus as well, and our anticipation that they will be used more often in the classroom, we are upgrading our Wi-Fi system at the South Campus in particular to support that additional load. So that's being worked on this summer. And we are in process of equipping our North Campus LPAC, the auditorium, basically, where chapel is normally done, and the cafetorium at the South Campus, where chapel, again, is always normally done, with some camera systems that will allow the staff and students involved in chapel to much more easily stream and record any chapel services so that they can either distribute at the time with live streaming or to students at home on recording if need be. So.
Very good. I want to jump back to Caroline's just a little bit. We didn't talk about the afternoon pickup, and I think that's probably because we're still finalizing those details, but I want to give you a chance to just share that with everyone on the call because I'm seeing some questions come in.
Similar to morning, Caroline, we anticipate afternoon pickup obviously will take a little bit longer, partly because unlike previous years, we can't take all the students out of their current classrooms and necessarily lump them together in hallways and all that. So we're still working through exactly what that plan looks like for how inside the school building, how we want to manage the flow of students prior to them exiting to go to their parents' car or whoever's picking them up. So yeah, it's sort of a behind the scenes activity we're working on, figuring out the best way to manage this before the student exits the building. And so we're still in process with that. There are several options we're looking through, but my expectation is that the largest thing will probably be it might take a little longer to get students out the building, and so car lines potentially at the end of the day could stretch a bit longer.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Dyer, and we're going to turn over to Daniel Townsley. And Mr. Townsley, first question, can you talk us through the re-entry scenarios as described in the New Heights educational plan?
Yes, thank you, Adam. If y'all could forward that slide to that plan. So this was published early June, but our reentry scenarios start with the ability for us to legally open a campus. So if there's no restrictions, and right now we haven't been made aware of any, so our plan is to open up early August, as we've stated on the calendar, August 6th. So if there's no changes to what the governor or the county specify, then we will open up campus. And when we open up campus, once the authorities give us that go-ahead or do not restrict that, then there's really two decisions for a family to make. And this goes in with the discussion of an online learning academy as well as on-campus learning and what was published. So for a family, once the campus opens up and we're able to open up school, then you will have a decision to make. Do you feel comfortable with your child attending Legacy on campus in person in a regular classroom setting, or for your personal family situation, is on-campus learning not something you're able to pursue? And so for students that can be on campus, there's no concerns their family has, then we'll move to classroom setting with our reduced size classes. It's social distancing, physical distancing. And at any time, if there's requirements on us to close campus, then we will move officially to distance learning. Distance learning will be part of our on-campus learning, and that will be just as a requirement that we move to officially. So on-campus learning and distance learning will be tied together based on what situations we're under with our governing authorities. If a family is not comfortable or has concerns or other health issues, and they're not able to return to a physical campus, then we're creating an option next year. The goal is for it to be a one-year option called online learning. And so this is for a family that is not able to return to campus. There will not be a way of going between online and on campus. It will be a different program, and parents will select that program and have a different enrollment contract for online learning. So for the online learning, we're going to launch this in August to provide an alternative educational program for currently enrolled families, legacy families who are unable and are uncomfortable sending their children back to a physical campus for the 2021 school year. Although LCA Online will provide a framework and support for families, the majority of the classwork and curriculum will be delivered primarily through written instructions and guidance, and will work best for a student and family who can work independently. Families who choose LCA Online will be relinquishing their spot for the on-campus physical classroom and might not have a spot to return to if personal and family situations change. Students in LCA Online will also not be able to participate in extracurricular, athletic, fine art, field trips, and any on-campus activities that will be offered for the school year. Student services, including guidance and college counseling, will also not be available for LCA Online students. So LCA Online is a different program than our on-campus program, than our distance learning that is part of our on-campus program, and is solely being offered for families in our community that, due to unique circumstances, need an alternative option for next school year. So there's two parts to the online program depending on the age of the child. So for 6th grade through 12th grade students, we will be partnering with 7-Star Online Academy. Since 2007, 7-Star has been a leading provider of online courses for Christian schools. In the past, we've had students take these for various reasons, and we've had very good feedback from those students. So we're partnering with them to provide a larger curriculum scope and offerings. Currently, there's over 500 Christian schools that use 7-Star courses. 7-Star incorporates the biblical worldview into its courses and is respected for its challenging and rigorous course offerings. So 7-Star will be providing the online curriculum as well as 7-Star faculty to assist families through the course materials. 7-Star instructors will grade assignments, provide feedback, and answer student questions. Unlike a traditional classroom, 7-Star instructors do not lecture, and there's no live classroom component. Almost all of the curriculum is gained by independent reading and working through the organized material posted online. It's estimated to take around 4 to 6 hours per week per course of time. And then if you take honors classes or AP classes, that time increases. For our younger students, it will be slightly different. There's not a lot of programs out there that we can partner with that have already been vetted and tried in a complete online environment. So for our younger students, kindergarten through 5th grade, that online program will be supervised by our lower school library and technology team. This program will still require a high level of independence on behalf of the student and family, but it will be more closely aligned to our lower school scope and sequence. We'll offer 5 courses: Bible, English, math, history, and science. But this option will also require parents to be heavily invested in facilitating daily learning for their child. So the online academy is something that parents would choose, not something to pivot out of. And it's different than our distance learning program. Distance learning is part of our on-campus program. But the online academy being offered next year is for current and newly enrolled families who, due to personal situations and concerns, are not able to send their child to our physical campus next year for on-campus classroom instruction. If your family is struggling with any financial situations due to the pandemic, please first work with our financial aid office. Our primary goal for the online academy is to offer an alternative option for 1 year to assist families during these unique times and circumstances they might be facing. If you'd like more information about that, and if that would be a good fit for your family situation, please reach out to myself or reach out to our admissions office. But I hope that clarifies the role and purpose and philosophy of our online program.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. I want to just pause for a second and let everyone know that we're going to go past the hour mark because we are going to answer all of the questions. So we encourage you to hang with us. If you can't, just a reminder that the recording will be sent. Continue to use the chat feature to submit your questions as you have them, and we'll do our best to get them all in. So Daniel, I want to come back to you for another question. Can you talk a little bit about how we will accommodate on-campus students who must be away from the physical campus for lengthy periods of time, and how we'll continue to deliver education?
Yes, thank you, Adam. If we ever move to distance learning, it's going to be on a large scale. It's not going to be if one student is absent from a class for an illness or for a COVID-related reason. And so for students that are ill or needing to miss class or have issues with COVID, then our teachers are working on their curriculum, developing and providing more resources that can be supported at home. So it's very hard for a teacher to do distance learning and classroom instruction simultaneously. So for those students that are at home sick, they will not transition to distance learning, but our faculty are working on having more resources, whether they be recordings, whether they be other resources online or that can be sent. They're working to add that to their curriculum so that if students are at home for an extended period of time, there would be more access to instructional material and being able to keep up with the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Gene, I want to transition over to you in the business office.
Okay. Well, our finance committee, who is made up of tuition paying parents, just like you, did take a look at what we were going to be offering for LCA online. And we looked at the underlying cost and any personnel that would need to be involved. And so we established the following tuition rates. Our lower school campus, which is going to be primarily an in-house developed curriculum that will be working with a coordinator, we're going to charge $6,000 annually. And then for our middle and upper school, who will be working with 7-star, normal classes will, full year classes will be $900 a course. And then those that are only semester only courses will be $750. For our upper school AP and dual credit courses, full year courses will cost $1,000 and our semester only courses will cost $850.
Okay, thank you. Gene, next question. Will there be an adjustment in tuition if we convert to distance learning for an extended period of time?
Yes, well, once again, our finance committee is going to look carefully at what the school is offering and what you're paying and investing in your kids. And if we encounter an extended period of time where we are having to convert to distance learning, we will look at what that value that we need to make an adjustment on, and we will make an adjustment to your tuition.
Okay. Hey, Daniel, we've seen a couple questions about admissions for students who choose an online option for the 21-22 school year. I'm wondering if you can just clarify. I think what I heard you say was that they won't be guaranteed a spot. Obviously, yes, we want them to remain in the community, but if a grade's at capacity, they may be at risk of being in a wait pool until a spot is open.
That is correct, especially for this year. If Online Academy is chosen, then that classroom spot will be open to another family. So if that's taken, then it would not be able to transition to. If space still remains, if family chooses online and then after a semester wants to transition back, that would be possible if the space and the spot was still available. For the following year, the goal is to keep you in the legacy family and keep you in the admissions funnel. So that the goal would be for you to be part of that when re-enrollment starts back up.
Okay. So it's just, obviously we want the families here. It's just not something we can guarantee because we don't know what the space availability will be.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Mr. McGee, we're going to come back to you. Will we be able to sustain these core classrooms, these micro class sizes in future years?
Well, in order to make this work, we have had to hire additional teachers and certainly reduce the size of our classroom. We already have some classroom limitations prior to the pandemic, but of course we've had to shrink those in order to achieve the appropriate social distancing within a classroom. So the answer is no, this is not sustainable over the long run. You know, we've had to make some budget reallocations, budget cuts, and even be willing to tap into our reserves to make this possible for a one-year period. And we're hoping that this pandemic is a thing of the past after this coming year. So, you know, we've made the commitment to keep our classrooms as small as possible so that we can ensure proper social distancing as much as possible. But that is not something we can sustain over the long run. In order to keep that type of teacher-student ratio, we'd have to raise tuition quite a bit more. So our plan is to return to our class size limits that we've always or historically have instituted after the pandemic passes.
Okay, very good. Can you talk about standards that will be in place for large group gatherings?
Well, you know, some of those are still to be determined. Again, if we have to violate the 6-foot social distancing, and I'd really rather call it physical distancing requirement, that will be obviously require everyone within a large group to wear a mask. We have yet to determine which large groups that we will, or large group gatherings that we will be able to host physically, or perhaps there's some that we need to move to a virtual meetings. And I'll give you an example, the men's Bible study. Because space is going to be a challenge, we may just host that virtually. I'm not saying we haven't yet made that decision, but you know, some of our larger groups, maybe Eagle Mama Luncheons will be more of a virtual meeting rather than an in-person. So again, we're still looking to see what environment we're going to be in and what we're going to be allowed to do by law. But you know, we'll take proper precautions when we have to gather in a large group, but some of those large groups may transition to a virtual meeting.
Okay, and we talked a little bit about this, but can you speak to it in a broader sense? Will parents be permitted on campus for group gatherings? Talked about Bible study, PTF activities, those kinds of things.
As much as possible and as often as possible, we will welcome parents to be on campus. Now, their check-in routine may be different. We will certainly check their temperatures. We may require them to wear masks while they are in the hallway or in a classroom setting or in any environment where there is close proximity to others. So yeah, there will be, the routine will change somewhat, but we're not going to prevent parents from coming onto our campus. We will institute some restrictions on visitors, so it won't be quite as easy for just someone to drop in, pop in without an appointment. But other than that, you know, our parents will still be able to join their students from time to time or have meetings with other parents, as long as we follow good health guidelines that are going to be laid out for us through the CDC and local and state authorities. You know, we'll try to keep the routine as normal as possible.
Yeah, it looks like in response to your answer there, we had a question about Eagle Expo. I think that applies there. Obviously, we want everybody back on campus for that event, but we're going to have to probably do so with some moderation or modifications to the event, or depending on what the climate is at the time, we may have to look at doing something totally different. You think that's a correct assessment?
Yeah, that's a really good summary of our thought process. You know, as we look at, you know, and the thing about it is, you know, it's hard to have school without having large group gatherings. But so we're not going to eliminate all of those, but we will take reasonable precautions to, as much as possible, ensure the health and safety of our community. So, you know, my message to everyone, parents, faculty, staff, visitors, there will be times in which we will be inconvenienced, but these are not normal times. And so we just have to get comfortable with the idea, with new routines. We have to be ready to accept that things will not be exactly as they have always been. You know, school will look very differently, but keep this in mind. School's going to look differently for every school in the nation. So this is not a legacy issue. This is an educational K through 12 issue. It actually goes through higher education. School's going to look very different, but we are still dedicated to providing the least restrictive environment that also ensures the health and safety of our community. So that is, we feel like we have a plan to do that. It's not going to satisfy everyone, and we can't customize everything for each individual family. But what we can do is offer our best effort in ensuring the health of your child while we try to maintain our normal routines as much as possible.
Very good. I want to jump over to Shannon Nelson and let her speak to some of the PTF events really quick. Shannon, do you have anything you can add to the PTF
Sure, yeah.
large parent gathering?
Yes, Adam, I'd love to address some of the questions regarding Eagle Expo, PTF events, development events. Happy to share that had a 2-hour-long meeting earlier this week with Heather Davis, who's our PTF president. We've got contingency plans in place for every single activity. So there's multi-layer contingency plans in place. If we're able to be fully in person, what does that look like? If we're not, how do we convert to a virtual opportunity so that our families can still connect in meaningful ways? So please, part will never change. It will never waver from that. And a lot of what you experienced in the spring will transfer over if we get to a place where we have to be more physically distanced. We're also looking at a lot of opportunities to take events outside if we can, to make that a little bit more comfortable. And then of course, like I said, we'll go virtual if we need to. But please know that plans are in place. PTF events, development events, all of those will be taken care of, and we can't wait to get back together with you in the fall.
All right, great. Tiffany, we're going to jump over to you.
Well, by the looks of the chat feature, I think specials and recess is the million-dollar question of the day. So I am pleased to announce that lower school children will continue to have specials next year. Students will participate in PE, art, music, Spanish, technology, and library. And you can be rest assured that our little ones will not be staying in their classrooms all day. So they need that time to get out of the classroom and get the wiggles out. And we are still going to have recess every day. It's so important for them to have time to socialize with their friends. And so I just want you to also know that our facilities department is working on a plan on ways to sanitize the playground equipment. I'm currently working on our recess schedule for next year, and what my goal is to for the classes to go out individually. So each homeroom class will go out at one time. For the moment, if things are relaxed throughout the school year, we can go back to what we have been doing, and the whole grade level can go out at one time. But we just are trying to find ways to get our students outside and out of their classroom. There are 2 specials that we have, which would be Spanish and technology, where the teacher will come to the classroom because of the spacing that we needed. We had to utilize those classrooms for homeroom classrooms next year. But on those days and in those instances, we will find other opportunities for your children to go outside of the classroom. I mean, we might take another extra mini recess or take a walk around the track and get some fresh air. And I need to join them myself, so I need to bring my tennis shoes every day. But anyway, just please know that, specials and recess is just some other opportunities during their day to bring some more normalcy to their little lives. So I hope that answers your question.
And what about field trip plans? How are you guys addressing those?
Well, at the moment, because we do have to make reservations, you have to reserve buses and, these venues that we go to, we are, going to plan, like the 4th grade trip, for example. We already have plans in place, dates scheduled for the 4th grade trip. Because it's, over a little bit, about a year away, but, depending on what's going on in our world at that time, we may have to cancel that. We also have opportunities where we might could try to find people to bring in-house field trips. But, if the venues are open, we're willing to take our students on field trips if we're allowed to. So that's the goal.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dibley, questions for you. Have start and end times been confirmed for next year?
So we're working on the start and end times. The challenge with that is obviously the car lines in the morning and the car line dismissal in the afternoon. With the new protocols, it's going to take us some more time, and so we have to figure out what's the best way to get students in and what's the best way to get students out in a way that's safe and practical. So I know Caroline's already been talked about, and we always need patience at the start of the year when it comes to Caroline's. And I would say that especially this year, we're going to need an extra dose of patience as we figure out the best way to make it happen. So start times will be staggered a little bit more than they are right now, just because of that challenge of trying to get everybody in and everybody out. Students will not be going to the cafeteria at this point in the morning if they get dropped off early. So we're going to ask if classes start at 8:15, that you would drop your student off so they can go straight from getting out of the car to be at their classroom at 8:15, rather than a 7:30 or a 7:45 drop off, because we don't have the bandwidth to supervise students that will come early right now, because it's an all hands on deck situation with the teachers and their workloads. So it'll be some staggered times, and we would ask that parents would respect those as much as possible to help the smooth running of that.
Okay. And I would say to parents out there, just we are trying to get those answers as quickly as we can. We have been kind of in a wait and see game as far as what the governor is saying and potential mandates and how that may impact start and end times, which so I just want you to hear me say we are not trying to delay getting this information to you. We just want to make sure that when we get it, it's final and it's accurate. So we just ask for your continued patience there. Back to you, Mr. Glenn, or Mr. Dibley, excuse me. We've talked about this a little bit, but I want to give you a chance to speak to it directly. Will we continue to have chapel next year?
Yes, and just before I address that, Caroline's will specifically for 7th and 8th grade. Typically, we release them. You know, they come in the morning anytime they want. That we release at the end of the school day. 7th and 8th grade will have to go to a typical Caroline dismissal where their names are called and they are released from the building as those names are called. It won't be a free-for-all for 7th and 8th grade as they release at the end of the day. In regard to chapel, you know, the real question is, you know, what are we doing for the spiritual development of the students? And chapel is one of those great ways that we get together in the community to worship together, to learn together, grow together. We will meet in those larger groups if allowed, but at this time we're not really planning on that. It'll be more like smaller groups. It'll be pre-recorded videos and lessons. The worship team may be playing in the cafeteria, and it may be streamed live into the rooms. So we're just going to have to be really flexible with the chapel opportunities that we have. But if we're allowed to and we're able to meet in big groups, then we will get back to that as soon as we're able. So everything I've said so far is speaks to lower school and middle school. I know that upper school, with the LPAC, they have just more opportunities. So they may be able to get together in larger groups and still maintain their physical distancing. So I imagine they'll be doing a combination of larger groups and small groups as well.
All right, last question for you, at least for now. Will the students use lockers next year?
So that's the big thing. Lockers are the big thing, right? So traditionally, students get 1 or 2 lockers that they could use throughout the year. But at this time, we're not going to be able to have students use lockers just simply because it will put them in unnecessary close proximity to one another. So we'll be asking that students will be bringing, for students to bring backpacks, that they will bring what they need for the day, and then they will carry that around with them. With the one possibility that maybe student athletes in their season, they may be allocated a designated locker to store their athletic supplies. But those lockers would be physically distanced as well. So that's where we are in lockers. Sorry that we're not going to be able to decorate and hang chandeliers and put carpets in them, but maybe next year.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mosley, going to jump over to you. The only question we have asked on every town hall thus far, what is the current update on athletics and fine arts, this time looking forward to the fall seasons?
Sure, thank you, Adam. So I did meet with Cole Johnson, our athletic director, yesterday to get an update. They have of course, we compete in the TAPS Association, and they are obviously trying to align with UIL, which is again waiting on the governor and the TEA. So we're still in a kind of a waiting mode there, but here's our modus operandus. Our modus operandus is we're moving forward for sports competing with mitigating things in there, such as locker room protocol, all those things that we're doing even this summer in our workouts, and able to handle contact tracing, all those things. So our plan is to move forward with sports. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what our associations want to do as well. The issue is we have not heard from them exactly what the fall is going to look like. There is a conference next week of all TAPS athletic directors. We're expecting to get more specific information then. And of course, as you know, the situation in Texas is going up and down, and that can affect things as we go. Please understand our goal is to provide as much of that as we can safely while working with our local government authorities to obviously keep the safety of our students at the first and foremost in our mind. So I wish I had more exact details. We are moving forward. Our coaches are working with our athletes. Our athletes are training and what we can under the current guidelines with the precautions that we have. And it's all go for us until we're told no. And that's kind of how we're moving forward. With regard to fine arts, it's the same type of situation. And there are some concerns with fine arts with regard to things like singing and blowing in a horn. And we are working with all of the different associations that we are connected to, the TMEA, Texas Music Educators Association, all of the national organizations, looking at research and all the things that they're saying. And here's what we know. For instance, I know we've had a family ask, what about a band and playing the instrument and physical distancing? So really, band, particularly in the fall, spends most of their practice outdoors, which will make it one of the safest classes that we offer because there are intervals that they're in place. We have ordered the wraparound little mask things that they can pull up so that when they take a break and they're standing around, getting their own personal water bottles, et cetera, during their marching practices, they're able to do that. And they're spaced out at almost 6-foot intervals in the show anyway. We're actually increasing those in our show creation with regard to band. So we also are physically distancing them in the band room. We also are looking at, could we do band practice in the LPAC, which provides even more spacing. We're working through that space analysis now. Mr. Murphy and his team, myself, working with Bill Dyer and his team with regard to what we can do or not do with regard to that. So we're planning to move forward in those areas and allow a safe option for us to continue to do fine arts accordingly. Of course, art supplies, we're emphasizing the things where they can use their own supplies, sharing of art supplies. We're going to make sure that those are safe if we do them or get them, provide them individually with regard to those supplies. And be careful about what activities and or learning options we utilize there. So those are all things that are being implemented so that we can move forward. It's very important in fine arts instruction. It's very important with our athletes, the lessons they learn in these classes that go beyond a typical, academic type knowledge things, but have so many other keys to well-rounded education. We're committed to them. We're moving forward in a safe manner, and we're staying in touch with the government authorities and all of the overarching associations to make sure we're implementing best practices.
Okay. Next question, will the music studios still be available for private lessons next year?
The answer to that is yes. We've heard that there's been some concern that is not going to happen. Of course, we were in a situation where we're reimagining all kinds of spaces to make this work. But the good news is the music studios are still going to be in place. We're still going to offer lessons in a safe environment, utilizing all of the precautions that we can. So the short answer to that is music studios are still available and private lessons will still take place.
Okay. Very good. Last question for you, Mr. Mosley. Will LCA online students be able to participate in extracurricular activities? Just want to give one more chance to clarify that.
Yeah, so if you choose the online academy, you're choosing to do remote instruction, okay, really independent type work with a teacher of record with regard to 7-star, and you are not going to be eligible to be involved. Now, think about the premise of this. If you're choosing online academy, what you're saying is you're not comfortable with your child being in these situations, and that would include fine arts, and it would also include athletics. So it makes sense when you think about it that that's the choice you're making. So we want to be very clear. If you choose that option, then you're not able to participate in athletics or fine arts.
Okay. we're going to keep pressing on. We've got maybe 10 or so general questions that have come in through the chat that I'm going to go ahead and move right into before we turn it back over to Mr. McGee to wrap some things up. So Angie, I want to jump back to you and just ask if you can speak to the type of masks that will be required. I've seen a couple questions come in, and if we'll be providing that guidance for our families.
Sure. At this point, we would just be following what the CDC would be requiring. I think reading through their information, they have required there to be 2 layers of fabric, a tight woven type of fabric. So following those recommendations, that's what we would also prefer our families to provide. Now, if the student forgets a mask, what would be available at school would be the disposable mask that has the trifold type of configuration. So unless those recommendations change, those are the ones we will follow.
Okay. Another question for you, Angie, while we have you here. If a student tests positive, when can they return to school? And then I've got some follow-up questions after that related.
Okay. At this point, again, following recommendations, the student would need to have a negative test result. They would also need to, I believe it's 72 hours of not having respiratory symptoms. So some of those things go hand in hand, that we would need both of those, and the doctor or whoever provided the test would be able to provide documentation that they would then bring to school.
Okay. And is that any different if they've just been exposed?
Yes. So if a student has possibly been exposed, then it would be a matter of, at that point, a family would be notified, and then they would have the option to choose whether they want to seek obtaining a test, or if they would choose to go ahead and have the 14-day self-quarantine. So until we would have the negative test, there would possibly be that 2 to 3 days of quarantining until we have that result back. But if there is an exposure and contact tracing indicates that they were with someone that tested positive, then that is the routine that they would follow.
Okay. And then last question related to that. If we have a student that shows symptoms during the day, can you talk about how that will be addressed and the protocol there?
Yes. At this point right now, still working, but have a plan for both clinics at both campuses. We would need, if a student comes down and is running a fever, we would isolate that student in the clinic. We would contact parents and encourage them to seek the doctor's recommendation regarding the source of the fever, knowing that all fevers are not going to be COVID-19 related. But in those situations, we just need to find out the source and then follow whatever action plan is required for that illness if it's not COVID-19.
Thank you, Angie. Glenn, question for you. Can you talk about class trips and the plan that we're looking at next year?
Yes, so all the class trips have been moved to the spring. So that would be so 5th grade is going to Sky Ranch. 6th grade goes to the Ark Encounter up in Kentucky. 7th grade has the opportunity to go to Houston. 8th grade has the opportunity to go to Puerto Rico. And then the DC trip is also moved to the spring as well. So we anticipate that the spring will be busy with trips, just based upon or dependent upon the health conditions and guidelines at that time. So we're hopeful that we can do that, but we will have to make that determination later in the year.
Okay. And while I've got you on, your plan is to have a 5-day school week, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Kevin, I'm going to jump over to you first. You answered this. It's been several town halls back, but while we're on the topic of class trips, senior trip has been moved to December, if I remember right.
Yes, the current senior class would have normally gone to Camp Eagle in obviously at the end of this past school year. We have moved that to December, and then we'll just monitor from there. There may be a possibility to push it to the spring as well. We will monitor that as the situation changes, but we already have a date in line in December for that as a backup, and then flexibility beyond that if needed.
Okay. And I want to ask you about two of your favorite days of the year, homecoming dance and prom. Plans for those next year?
Well, we're going to move forward with what we can do. Obviously, homecoming dances and spacing and those kind of things, it's really going to depend on the environment at the time. Again, our modus operandus is do as much as we can, at least restrictive as we can, and keep them safe. So that's really going to be a call decision much closer to as we move into the school year.
Okay. And can you talk about your schedule a little bit? I know not everything is final, but can you speak to that at all?
Sure. We have a little bit more flexibility with older students and the independence that they have, and looking at distance learning, going in and out, potentially in and out of distance learning, and also with taking our teachers and moving them to teaching 6 out of 8 periods and sharing collaborative learning with regard to sharing different sections. Due to the increased sections, teachers are going to need some time to do that. So we put a task force together with parents, teachers, administrators, and students, and looked at 5-day models, which are traditional models, and 4-day models in which we can get the amount of class time and allow that time on Wednesday for teachers to collaborate, for students to be able to move forward. And because they are a little bit more independent and able to do that at home, that might be a possibility. So it's actually come out that the 4-day model seems to be the most prominent with regard to continuing learning and it being consistent and being able to do. So we're leaning toward that, but no final decision has been made yet. But the input that we've gotten from families and from students and from our staff has been tremendous in the task force. And so that's something we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Ken, I think that you're still with us. We had a question come up, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that as your team gets to planning this summer. Can you talk about how Legacy defines diversity? Is it just based on a skin color or cultures? I just wanted to give you a chance to speak directly to that.
No, it's not based off of just skin color. I mean, we recognize that diversity comes in all sorts. I mean, when you look at diversity, look at cultural diversity, socioeconomic, racial, education, life experiences. And if I happen to forget one, please forgive me, charge it to my head, not my heart. But when we typically look at the big picture, it is about race, right? Now, of course, we want to address the different levels of diversity, which is why we are getting together to meet and discuss plans on how we can address these in a manner in which will be beneficial to the parents. But it isn't just about race. But again, that is the elephant in the room. But no, there's so many other areas of diversity that we would like to address if they happen to come up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Kevin, I'm going to jump back to you. I apologize. I left a few questions off of your list. Will LCA online students who are, if we have a senior that chooses that, will those students graduate with the 2021 class?
Yes, I mean, the online program will be integrated into our graduation requirements and how that works. So yes, that will not prevent someone from graduating as an LCA student. They are still an LCA student. They're just doing things, remotely and not connected. They're not involved in fine arts and those things, but they're still an LCA student and will graduate with the class of 2021. So that's a great question, but that is the answer.
Okay, perfect. Hey, I want to give you a chance to speak to this. I saw a question come up. We included some information in our email on Wednesday, but talk about the professional schools program and the capstone internship opportunities. I want to give you a chance to speak to that and how our community can help, especially in light of the pandemic.
Absolutely. So the pandemic has created some headwinds in finding partners that are willing to take on students in this environment. Our goal is to still provide internship opportunities, and we do have alternate plans if that ends up being shut down completely, and how we can continue have our students engage in career opportunities and career knowledge, career orientation. But our plan is to find partners. And listen, if you're out there, you're an LCA family, you own a business, or you work at a business that, well, you could look at taking one of our interns and working with them. And it may be that we move to 1 day a week. You know, if we have a 4-day schedule and Wednesdays is a time that they maybe can go in and do that, or reducing those hours somewhat, but still having some contact, whether that be virtual or in person. We believe the value of partnering with someone in the professional community, working with our students, helping them understand the real life application and to give purpose to their learning is still very, 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 very important. So we need your help. So if you know of someone, reach out to Jeff Veal. He's our Director of Professional Schools Program. He's working on multiple scenarios as we go through, but our goal is, again, just like it is in athletics, anything else, move forward as much as we can with partners who are willing to work with us. But the pool of those in the general public has shrunk because of natural concerns. But we feel that the opportunities are still there. We just have to work harder to find them, and we need your help. So please reach out to Jeff Veal or myself if you're willing to help, or you know of someone who would be willing to provide these opportunities for our students.
Perfect. And I know we also need in that survey, and we'll continue to send that survey out in the next couple of weeks, but if you're willing to speak or know someone who might be able to just speak to our students, that's also a value.
Absolutely. Our symposiums, we're still bringing professionals on campus. Now, they'll have to have their temperature taken and those kind of things, but we still want to engage with the community, both in learning dialogue and also hands-on professional experience as well. So that's a great point, Adam.
Okay. Hey, Daniel, I want to bring it back to you for a few more questions about online. We've seen some questions about when should they notify the school of their intent, and I wanted to give you a chance to speak to that.
If you're interested in online, please reach out and just let us know so we can start a discussion with you and your family to determine if it would be a good fit and go over more of the details. So we'd like to know by the start of school, but if it's something you're considering or curious about, please reach out to myself for admissions, and let's start that discussion earlier so that you can have as much information as you need for your particular situation.
Yeah, very good. And then can you talk about whether Legacy Extended Care will be offered next year?
Yes, it will. So we will have extended care.
All right, perfect. Mr. McGee, going to turn it back over to you. I've got a few questions that I'm hoping you can speak to before I give you the opportunity to wrap things up. Can you talk about the possibility of extending Thanksgiving break to Christmas break? And probably just in general refer to the flexibility we built into the calendar.
Yeah, we took that in consideration when we adopted the revised calendar by starting the school year 1 week early and by giving us the opportunity to extend it for 1 week later, plus capturing 5 of our full day teacher in-service days. We have the ability, if necessary, to shut school down for 15 additional days and still meet our required days to meet. So I think that's the genius of our calendar, is that we've built in flexibility. Now, if we go to distance learning, that is considered a full school day. We would only use those flex days if we just decided to extend holidays and just shut down school altogether. So it is one of the things we talked about is during, if we see a heightened infection rate and the need to shut down campus between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we have those days accounted for. So we can tap into those flex days and just have one long extended break from Thanksgiving to Christmas. But I want to emphasize this. We don't know what environment we're going to be in. So we haven't already made that decision. We've just given ourselves the leeway to make that decision if necessary.
All right. And just I want to bring this up one more time. Uniform guidelines, we talked about those at the beginning.
Well, just to reiterate, we are suspending the dress requirement, the dress uniform requirement for next year. So for example, at the upper school, you won't have to purchase a blazer for next year, just because we just don't know what we're going to be able to provide in the way of special programs or chapel services. So we just felt like it'd be in the best interest and relieve some stress from our families not to worry about purchasing a dress uniform, but that doesn't mean the daily wear is still in place. So please refer to those guidelines that are in the student parent handbook.
All right, perfect. Those are all of my questions. I just want to extend a personal thank you to everyone for hanging with us, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. McGee.
All right. Well, thank you, Adam. And I want to thank parents, all of you, for submitting your questions. This was the most active town hall session we've had yet, and we anticipated it would be. And there are many questions you still have that we haven't been able to answer in this in the last hour and a half. So please bear with us. We'll try to answer your questions as soon as we can. You can expect an FAQ coming out soon. And there will be regular communications coming from your principals and in my blogs. So just be patient. There, again, many of the questions you're asking, we just are not in a position to answer yet. So, but we will. And as you can see, we've answered a lot. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how we intend to launch the new school year. You also have an understanding of what the online academy may look like if you choose that option. But I want to emphasize this and re-emphasize what I said earlier, and that is, school as we know it will be different next year. That's going to be true for every school in the country. So we have to be used to we have to get ourselves ready for a new routine. No school, including Legacy, can guarantee absolute safety of its children. Just by sending your child to school, you're assuming some element of risk. If that risk is not tolerable for you as a family, you now have an option, and that is you can pursue the online academy. It's at a much reduced price, but it still will be a quality program. We have vetted the 7-star program, and we are providing our customized or legacy curriculum for grades K through 5. So if you just are not comfortable with your child coming to the physical campus, please consider the online academy. But understand there are limitations to that, and but it is an option if you can't get to a comfort level. Also, want to parents reassure you of this. While the environment and our routines may change, there is something that won't change, and that is the care and concern and attention that your children will receive from loving, dedicated teachers, wise administrators, and devoted support staff. That will not change no matter the environment we find ourselves in. And in fact, I would say our core classroom concept actually enhances or accentuates the care, concern, and attention we can provide our students. So again, that is what you're paying for, parents. You're paying for that attention. You're paying for the promise we make that we will know your child, we will love your child, and we will prepare your child. That promise has not changed. And so with that, I thought in closing, I would share again words that I shared with you back in March when we first went into our distance learning mode. And it's from the book of Lamentations. And this is the prophet Jeremiah and his words, even while he was lamenting the state of Jerusalem and all the bad things that happened to the Jewish people. He found hope in these and wrote these words, and I want to read these as our closing prayer. This is Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 26. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him, it is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Amen. Now I'll turn it back over to Shannon Nelson to close us.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. McGee. Thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to all of our attendees today. So just a few quick notes before we officially close out. Wanted to share, again, all of our resources. A big one to point out to you is at the bottom of the slide. If you have questions not answered today, if you would like those questions answered, questions@legacyca.com is your place to go. So please send your questions to that email address and we will do our best to get answers to you as quickly as possible. A few final notes, save the dates. We've got a lot of big stuff coming up. So in the month of July, we will have a July Town Hall meeting. It'll be on Friday, July 17th, same time, same place. We'll meet you at noon and we'll look forward to sharing even more updates as we continue to learn together as to what the future is going to look like. Tuesday, August 4th is Eagle Expo. That'll be in the evening, so mark your calendars. Again, we'll be putting together the plan to make sure that you have the opportunity to meet your teachers and get settled into the school year before we begin school. And then last but certainly not least, the first day of school is Thursday, August 6th. So please do mark your calendar for that date. And with that, we bid you adieu. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate each of you, and we'll look forward to seeing you in July.